Welcome to Game Changers. A remarkable season for both the Florida Panthers and the Miami Heat have come to an end. Mike Cunio here with you in studio with Steve Goldstein. We're going to start with the Miami Heat. You know, I think they were the more surprising team, honestly, just considering how their regular season had gone so up and down. Did you think they overachieved throughout the playoffs? Well, is that how people will remember this team?
You know, it's a great question, and it's another great question, by the way, that you didn't ask. And know which team was more surprising. I think that's really interesting. They literally both got in the final. Well, the Heat, literally the final game, the play-in game, and the Panthers got into the playoffs with 72 hours left in the regular season, barely made it. So that's a great question, but that was not your question. The question was about overachieving, and yes, when you look at the roster makeup and the fact that they only won 44 games in the regular season, sure, they overachieved. You have Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, obviously established players, and then a bunch of guys that people didn't know a lot about, people that were let go by other teams, depth draft picks. So yeah, when you look at the way the roster was made up, they did overachieve, but then when you start watching the games like you did, you know, covering the team there, you know, and in the finals, and you watch the way these guys played, maybe not overachieving. Yeah. Maybe Gabe Vincent and Max Strus and Duncan and all these guys, they're that good. Okay,
so the reason why I had mentioned the Panthers in that, because I think the Panthers were a hot team, one of the hottest teams in the NHL towards that second half of the season.
Yeah, they went 6-1 and won the last few weeks.
So they went in pretty hot. Right. Okay, so here's how the Heat end up finishing. As we all know, the 8th seed. And they did some great things, but they clearly need help. The whole Damian Lillard thing, do they have the capital to do this? Well, is he a missing piece? Do you need just like an elite sharpshooter to get it done? Because the thing that bothered the Heat the most was they couldn't hit shots. And I hate to whittle it down to just that, but at the end of the day, their shot makers look like they did during the regular season.
Yeah, they look like maybe a bunch of undrafted guys in some ways. I don't think, I mean, obviously it helps. Right. I don't think that solves the problem. He's not stopping Nikola Jokic. So this is something you had talked about, Mike, and we had discussed on Sports Desk here on CBS News Miami on the air on Sunday nights right after the 11 o'clock news.
Nice
Yeah, we're on every Sunday. And you and I talked about this, I think in January and February. You were on that train of they need more size.
Yeah.
You know, they have too many perimeter players that shoot, and we know what happens to that, and we found out in the NBA Finals. You know, those shots from three, they come and go a little bit. You know, you could shoot 45, 50% for a game, but hard to do that every single game. So if it's me, I look at this Heat team, I look at that roster, and they need to be bigger. That's what I think.
When you were watching the games, did you think there was something wrong with Jimmy? Because in the stadium, you're watching, you're like, I don't know if he has the same liftoff.
Yeah, no, he didn't. And I guess they won't say, but there was speculation about the ankle. And, you know, give him all full marks. He gutted it out at the end of that Game 5. Jimmy Butler and Matthew Tkachuk were very mirror image of one another. You know, coming up in big spots in the playoffs. We know Tkachuk, we'll get to that, but basically has a broken body. A broken sternum is a broken body. And he wasn't the same in the finals. And Jimmy Butler wasn't the same in the finals. So certainly it looked like that because, you know, it wasn't long ago, if people forget, Milwaukee, the Knicks, I mean, he was unstoppable. He was pouring in 40, 45 points in those games. Now, Denver did a great job. They do a good job defensively. But, yeah, I agree with you. He didn't seem to have that same physical ability in the finals that he did in the other rounds.
Elsewhere on this roster, the Miami Heat will have some decisions to make Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, a couple guys that probably do some paydays. Do you let them walk so you can go forward other things? I mean, you look at the Miami Heat culture and the way they do things, they could find these guys somewhere else. It just takes time to develop.
That's the big question. You know, and they've been doing, Pat Riley's been doing this for decades. Literally, you go back to when he stopped coaching the Lakers with the Knicks in the early 90s and guys like John Starks and Anthony Mason who end up playing for the Heat. And then, you know, with the Heat, countless, you know, start with the Ike Austins of the world and all these players. So, you know, you look at it and Pat Riley and that great staff with Andy Ellisberg and everybody else in basketball operations, they've been able to get under those rocks and find those guys. So do you pay those guys, whatever it is, you know, $15 million, $12 million, whatever it commands? Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I would think that they could probably use, if it's too much money, I'm sure they've got their formulas. They could probably use that money elsewhere. And like I said, you know, none of those guys are stopping Jokic. I mean, I do think, and they won the East. So, you know, you could say that, but, you know, I do think the Heat, along, you know, with Bam, probably need a little bit more size.
Yeah, they definitely need more size. Because remember, as you mentioned before, who they brought in, Cody Zeller, Kevin Love, it was the guys in the middle of the year. The guys in the middle of the year can't be your starters in the finals. That just can't be the way, especially if you're buying them off, I don't want to say the trash heap, but literally off the street. That's tough to lean on in those moments. Spo said, and he says this all the time, we have enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, didn't expect anything different, did you?
Yeah, I mean, if this is what it looks like next year, are you happy as a Heat fan? Do they have enough?
Yeah, I thought it was a great comment by Spo because of what you just said. Mm-hmm. Because if this is what they have next year, no one wants to replay that press conference from the end of the season saying, oh, we need this, we need that, and then everybody is back. So, right. And you know what, Eric Spoelstra, the way he is and the great coach that he is, the basketball mind that he is, I'm sure he believes that. I'm sure he believes that, they won the one game against Denver, that 3 more times next year if they make the finals, they can shoot close to the way they did in game number 2 and get it done. He probably also knows that Jimmy Butler maybe wasn't, 100%. So, look, I still think a little more size would be needed, but it is really nitpicking a team that goes through Milwaukee, goes through the Knicks. By the way, those 2 series with relative ease, let's say that, and then looked like they were in full command against the Celtics and did have Game 6 actually won, and then come back and win Game 7. Maybe we look at numbers and stuff like that, Mike, maybe a little bit too much. Maybe, the way this unit gelled and the heart and the, character they have and the way they play together, maybe it is enough. Maybe that 7-game series against the Celtics had some bad effects. Maybe these guys did get more dinged up in those extra 4 games they had to play, or extra 3 games as opposed to just sweeping them. And look who they lost to. I mean, that guy, Jokic.
Generational type of guy.
This guy is, and by the way, Jokic comes out the day after they win the championship talking about parade and goes, basketball's not the most important thing.
Not surprising.
I got stuff. Basketball's not that important and you play like that?
This is a guy who they have to take the MVP trophy out to Serbia to give it to him.
Right.
Like, he ain't showing up for this stuff. Maybe that makes it even more infuriating.
So they lost to a team, that's been together now.
Yeah.
Malone's been in the league for a decade, a terrific coach. They've drafted well. They got size. They got the best player, and it's probably not even close.
They're going to be good for a while.
So the fact that they lost to them, you kind of just tip your hat. They were the better team.
No, they certainly were the better team. Had the Heat beat them, I think it would have been quite the overachievement. All right, more to come here on Game Changers. We're going to take a look at the Florida Panthers season, how they lost in the Stanley Cup, and what's next for them. And will Matthew Tkachuk fix just the hole in his chest at the moment? We'll be right back. Well, the Florida Panthers lose to the Vegas Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup Final. Matthew Tkachuk, one of many Florida Panther players injured in this playoff run. Steve Goldstein, Mike Cunio here. I mean, Goldie, they were the walking wounded, according to Paul Maurice. So what do you make of just the effort that Tkachuk put in, willing to play a Game 4, knowing he had a broken sternum?
Yeah, well, he finished Game 3 after that hit. And then in Game 4, supposedly, he couldn't get out of bed the day of the game. I mean, his brother had to get him up out of bed, supposedly, and I probably no video of this, but if you can imagine the scene before a championship round game, and teammates are tying the guy's skates and putting his equipment on.
Right.
And this guy lines it up. This is a guy that already has an 8-year contract, has already made a huge impact. He's, one of the top 2 or 3 reasons, whatever it is, they're even in the Cup final. He easily could have said, hey, I can't go. But he is the total package. Heart, grit, character, production, and talent. And what do I make of it? I make of it one of the great, gut checks that we've seen that Matthew Tkachuk got out there. And by the way, nearly got Game 4 after sitting out most of the third period because he couldn't really move.
Yeah.
They finally put him on the ice with a couple minutes left. He nearly got the game tied.
What do you make of this season? What do you, in particular, the run? Because, again, they were hot towards the end of the year. Is that team that finished 2023 and leaked into the playoffs, is that what we can expect next season? Or is it going to be, a struggle for the first 5 months of the year?
Well, I think it's going to be tough to make the playoffs anyway, because it always is. There's always 1 or 2, like the Pittsburgh Penguins, Sidney Crosby did not make the playoffs. Alex Ovechkin, the Capitals, did not make the playoffs. Maybe there's a changing of the guard there. Certainly you want the Panthers to start better. I mean, chasing, they were 9 points out halfway through the season. Usually you don't make up that ground. They've got to get the good goaltending right from the start. Call it what it is. First half of the season, Mike, the goaltending was bad. Yeah. Whether it was Bobrovsky, whether it was Spencer Knight. Luckily, they had Alex Lyon. He came in January, kept their heads above water, and then he's the reason they made the playoffs. He went on the run late. So when you look at that record, in the 8 losses after regulation, They were 42-40. You know, now you got points in those other games, but barely made the playoffs. In most years, the number of points they had would not have made the playoffs. Usually you have to get 3-4 more points to get in. So, but certainly when you look at the start of the season, there's no new system to learn. There's no, hey, we got to change the way we play. They did all that this year.
Yeah.
That's all over with because Paul Maurice will be back, and hopefully everybody's healthy for October, 4 months from now. We don't know that because Ekblad's going to have surgery, and who knows how long it takes these other guys that were so banged up, as you mentioned, to get healthy. But, yeah, if they get off to the same start, it would be a disappointment next year.
How will you remember this season? Because, you know, the fun that it took to get in and then to beat Boston, like, to me, that stands.
Your call, buddy.
Yeah, that stands out.
Call.
That stands out above everything. Like, Game 6 of that series to me is like everything. But the way they finished, I know they were injured, but, you know, giving up 9 goals in the Stanley Cup elimination game, do you tend to lean on or remember that more, or will you remember kind of the run leading up to it?
Yeah, I think the run. And by the way, Mike Cunio and Matthew Tkachuk, I can tell you this now, if it's over, talking to them personally in late March and April. The only 2 people that said bring on the Bruins, Matthew Tkachuk was with you. He said, yeah, let's play them. We match up well with them.
Yeah.
And I'm walking away like, all right, dude, they've got like 135 points. So Mike Cunio, Matthew Tkachuk, Sports Knowledge, South Florida, 1-2. Pick your order.
We'll give Tkachuk number 1.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'll remember it more for the whole run.
Yeah.
And it was disappointing going out like that. I mean, you would have loved to see the Panthers in that Game 5 play the way the Heat did in Game 5 in Denver when, you know, it looked at times like it was slipping, and then all of a sudden with a minute and change left, the Heat have a chance to win the game. They've got the lead. But Vegas was too tough. As you said, the Panthers were too beat up, but I'll remember the entire run. And the biggest moment for me, Mike, because of all of the losing the franchise had done for years before the last couple of years, was the Tkachuk goal against Carolina and him sliding across the ice.
Yeah.
It was a goal that, and it never happens, it was the latest goal in NHL history to clinch a series in regulation.
3 seconds. Yeah.
So you still had to do a face-off, but you knew they were going to the Stanley Cup final on that. Like, you couldn't write the storybook any better than it happens at home and he slides across the ice. So that'll be the one that's really etched in stone.
That'll be a statue. Bobrovsky, I mean, I don't know if a goalie has caught more crap than this guy has the first few years of his time here in Florida. Has he completely redeemed himself? Do you kind of just forget the first few years here and just be like, this is the Bob that we were promised?
I think so, because he went on that run. If they would have won it, it really would have erased all of it. The fact that for those 2 series, you know, and I've been watching hockey a long time, he was as good as any goaltender. You go back to the Patrick Waugh days and some of these other goalies that just get red hot during the Stanley Cup playoffs and carry their team. The series against Toronto, the series against Carolina, the Panthers won 8 of 9. Yeah, they did a good job, but it was on Sergei Bobrovsky. Those are 6, maybe even a 7-game series against Toronto if Bob doesn't play the way he did. So, you know, good on him. And it's the first time he's ever been that far. Yeah. So you going into next season, Mike, you figure that he plays anywhere from, 50 to 55 games, and you have your fingers crossed and you hope that maybe 35, maybe 38 of them are close to the level that he played out in the playoffs. That would make next season a little bit smoother. The
Bob chants, the Bob signs, you just had to feel good for the guy, considering everything. So we'll see how he does next year. Thank you, goalie. Still on Game Changers, the Marlins looking to stay above 500, and one player is chasing history. Can Luis Arias hit above 400? We're going to talk about that next. Welcome back to Game Changers. Panthers did their part. The Miami Heat did their part. The Hurricanes, FAU Owls all did their part. Miami Marlins, you're now on deck. Steve Goldstein joining us here in studio as always. Let's start with Luis Arias. The Marlins are red hot. We're going to get to that in a second. He's cooled off a little bit. He's flirting with batting 400 for the year. Do you, in baseball in general, is it possible anymore to get there to the 400 mark?
Well, the factual answer to your question is no, because Ted Williams did it 82 years ago. I mean, right. And you've had guys over the years, especially back in the 80s, the George Bretts, the Wade Boggs, that have flirted with it into the summer. Unfortunately, Lewis went, hitless in Seattle, and that series. That was a shame because it was starting to get steam. What was he up to, 402 or 403 over the weekend in Chicago? Then he went hitless a few games, so he's back there. It just shows you how hard it is to do. You go a series without hits, and you go from, 402 down to 382, whatever it is. So, no, I don't think anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Here's where he is now. It's been incredible, and he's 22 points away from 400. But what a trade by the Marlins. Oftentimes, Mike, you give away the pitcher. You always question that. You give away pitching for hitting. It's easier to find hitting. But he has been remarkable, and I think he's got, the way he hits, it has to help the team from a belief standpoint.
So he kind of rubs off on everyone. I remember talking to Jazz.
That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, Jazz Chisholm during the year, or in the beginning of the year, I was talking to him in the clubhouse, and he was telling me how he tries to mimic everything Luis Arias does, because he's like, this guy just keeps getting hit, so I want to be like this. He says Luis sleeps with a bat at night, gets working at home in the cage before even coming into work. He says work ethic's incredible. At media day, he hit a drone. I mean, he hits everything. Like he's batting around, he accidentally hits the drone. So he hits everything. The Marlins are hit right now as well. One of their hottest starts probably since 1997. And everyone knows that year they went on to win a World Series. No big deal. They are kind of picking up the mantle here, the baton of the hot streak that South Florida sports is on. With all the comebacks they've had, I think they're up to 20 comebacks this season. Is it sustainable? Can this be the next big run for South Florida?
I think it can be. I think they have a chance. You look at teams in the National League, like the Mets, who are having a terrible year. Yeah. Some of those teams with bigger expectations.
It hurts you to say that?
It does not hurt me to say that.
just
a little bit, maybe a little bit. But what the Marlins are doing, I think, is sustainable. Yuri Perez has been, I watch him pitch, Mike, and I'm not putting him in the class, but there's little shades of Jose Fernandez there, I think. Just from the... when Perez is pitching,
you want to watch.
You want to watch the game.
Right.
And I haven't said that about many Marlins over the years. And, all these guys chipping in. I mean, Soler's having a great year.
Yes.
And Skip Schumacher, first-year manager, doing a great job with his team, relating to the players well. So when you look at the National League, you look where they are, the big question will be, and it seems like you and I have discussed this every year, that they're skirting around 500. Do they go out over the next 6 weeks and make a move? Number one, tell the market we're all in. We're putting our chips in the table. We think we can make it, and let the chips fall where they may. Once you get there. And number two, you're telling the guys in that clubhouse that have been working hard all year, the Jazz Chisholms and the Luis Arias, and you're telling them, hey, we believe in you, so here's a little bit of help. Maybe the Marlins will learn something from the Heat and the Panthers. It doesn't matter what you do in the regular season and where you finish. Just get into the tournament. Because once you get in, anything can happen.
Certainly. But baseball, it's probably the hardest, I think, because, last year we looked at the Marlins. They were around the All-Star break, I think there were 5 games out of the wild card. You're like, oh, we could get there maybe. Then they fell off.
You think it makes a difference, though, if they're in a spot in a month at the All-Star break? Because that's different than being 5 out.
100%. Yes. I think it makes a huge difference. All right, we're going to have some What's Trending stuff coming up.
We love that.
Yes, we do.
That's your gig, man.
We're going to the phones next.
Going to the
phone next.
Bill and Davey, you're on the air.